Greetings. The title of this video is If Matthew 24 verse 4 through 34 is admitted to be AD 70, then all prophecy has been fulfilled. And I haven't done videos in a while. I just did a couple when it came to Israel onlyism as I came home and seen some things going on in a group there. So I thought I would just do this video here as I really don't have time to do too many videos. But this one I find is very important, and I don't think it can be refuted. Partial preterists are those that want to divide the Olivet discourse. Okay, we have verse 31. Matthew 24:31, the gathering of the elect from the four corners of the earth, is a direct allusion to Isaiah 11, verse 10 through 12, chapter 27, verse 13, chapter 43, 5 through 7, and 49, 5 through 6. And you can compare this to Jeremiah 30 and many other passages. In Isaiah, this second Exodus gathering of the tribes of Jacob are to the land, Zion, the kingdom. In context of these passages, we have all of the major covenantal promises being fulfilled at the same time. Zion restored, the Davidic kingdom fully restored, the resurrection. Point number 2. If only one promise from the prophets is fulfilled, then by necessity all of the promises, including the resurrection, have been fulfilled. The Davidic and New Covenants are extensions of the Abrahamic Covenant. One cannot have Israel and the nations gathered into Zion, the land, without resurrection. Point number 3. The Matthean version of the Olivet, Matthew 24 through 25, is the New Testament source for eschatology. Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 draws heavily from the Olivet. In 1st through 2nd Thessalonians, we see Paul making a progressive argument drawn heavily from Matthew 24 through 25. This cannot be refuted. Point number 4, John in Revelation from the beginning of the judgments under the seals draws heavily from the signs of Matthew chapter 24, which is a recapitulation again and again throughout the book. All scholars agree on this point, with the exception of the premillennialist, who takes Revelation sequentially instead of as a recapitulation. Point number 5, even in 1 John chapter 2 through 4, I've noticed very recently, actually yesterday I think it was, that he is drawn from Matthew chapter 24 as well. Now let's get our first passage up here, and we're going to demonstrate if one promise is fulfilled, they're all fulfilled. They're not given out in piecemeal. They're all fulfilled at the same time. Restoration is fulfilled at the same time for Israel in the prophets. It's not in piecemeal. So Matthew 24:31, and he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Let me first go to Isaiah chapter 11, as he's drawn from there heavily. He's drawn mainly from Isaiah 11 and Isaiah 27, but he's also alluding to Isaiah 43 and 49, and maybe even Jeremiah 30. But Isaiah, well, where am I going here? Going back to Matthew. Isaiah chapter 11, and we all know this passage. Isaiah chapter 11, verses 10 through 12. And in that day the nations will resort, or they will follow the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious. That's one group of people, the nations. Then it will happen on that day, the same day, the Lord will recover the second time with his hand the remnant of his people who remain from Syria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he will lift up a standard for the nations, and assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Three groups of people: the Gentiles and nations. Verse 12, the standard for the nations. The vanquished ones of Israel, and the dispersed of Judah. There goes Israel onlyism. And yet here in Isaiah chapter 11, this is the second Exodus understanding, as we see this throughout Isaiah, especially Isaiah chapter 40 through 55, and other passages, Jeremiah 30 and whatnot. This language of the Exodus, as this is the second Exodus, as we see clearly throughout the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 3 through 4, chapter 10, specifically refer to the Exodus ending in the fall of Jerusalem. But for the remnant of his people who will be left, just as there was for Israel, in that day they came up out of the land of Egypt. This is the second Exodus, Isaiah 11:19. And so, the language here, the highway, so on and so forth, it is of the second Exodus. And of course, beginning here in verse 6, the wolf will lie down with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lying together, so on and so forth. They are being restored to Zion. That's where Israel is being restored to. They're being restored to Zion, to the kingdom, to the land. And it's the branch of the Lord who would do this, the branch of Jeremiah, the branch of Ezekiel. That's Christ. He would do this gathering. So that's Isaiah chapter 11. Let's go to the Isaiah's Apocalypse, Isaiah 24 through 27. Isaiah 24 through 27 is one section, and it's Isaiah chapter 27 we're after. What am I looking for here? Isaiah 27 verse 13. It will come about also in that day that a great trumpet, that's Matthew 24:31, specifically, will be blown, and those who were perishing in the land of Assyria and who were scattered in the land of Egypt will come to worship the Lord in the holy mountain at Jerusalem. So that they would come to the mountain in Jerusalem. That's Mount Zion. That's Isaiah chapter 2. And if we go back just a bit to Isaiah chapter 2, and there's debate within Isaiah. Is Isaiah 1 through 6, is it one whole section, or is there subsections in there? Some say 1 through 5, 1 through 6. Some say chapter 2 alone. I say chapter 2 through 4 would be that one subsection. But Isaiah chapter 2 is the day of the Lord, and it speaks about Zion being restored. Now it will come to pass in the last days, the mountain of the Lord will be established on the chief mountains, and will be raised above the hills, and the nations will stream to it, and many peoples will come and say, let us come to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he might teach us his ways. For the law will go forth out of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And so this is very, very clearly the new heavens, new earth, Zion being restored, the kingdom, the land. That's Matthew 24:31. And that's Isaiah 11, 10 through 12, Isaiah 27 through 13. Now, to Isaiah 43, 5 through 7. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east and gather you from the west, and I will say to the north, give them up. To the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I have created with my glory, whom I have formed, even whom I have made. And so clearly this would be something that he's echoing. The north, south, east, and west, and so on and so forth. Let me see here. Alright, and the next one will be Isaiah 49, 5 through 6. My favorite chapter in Isaiah. Now says the Lord, whom formed me from the womb, to be his servant. This is Christ. This is one of the servant songs. To bring Jacob back to him, so that Israel might be gathered to him. For I am honored in the sight of the Lord, and my God is my strength. He says, it is too small a thing that you should be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and restore the preserved ones of Israel. I will also make you a light to the nations, so that my salvation might reach to the end of the earth. Again, we have three groups of people here for the Israel-only cult. Again, three groups of people. The tribes of Jacob. The tribes of Jacob, and that would be all the tribes. That's Isaiah chapter 11. All the tribes of Jacob will be preserved, and he will be a light to the nations, and salvation to the ends of the earth. That's two groups of people there, but that's what Christ is drawn from. And then we read on in Isaiah 49, my favorite chapter, beautiful chapter. He speaks about Zion being restored. Verse 18, part B, you will surely put on all them as jewels and bind them as a bride. This is marriage language. This is the same as Isaiah 52, Isaiah 61, 62, that in Zion, the New Jerusalem, we have the marriage. And so here we don't only have the regathering to the land, to Zion, to the kingdom, but we have the marriage as well. And so these are the passages in Jeremiah chapter 30, but he wouldn't really be alluding to that, Christ, in Matthew 24, 31. But Jeremiah 30 says the same thing, give them up from the south, and so on and so forth. And so Isaiah chapter 11, Isaiah chapter 27, 43, and 49 is Jesus alluding to and echoing when he says he's going to gather the elect from the four winds, from the four corners of the earth. And point number 2, if only one promise from the prophets is fulfilled, then by necessity all of the promises, including the resurrection, have been fulfilled. The Davidic and New Covenants are extensions of the Abrahamic Covenant. One cannot have Israel and the nations gathered into Zion and the land without the resurrection. And in Isaiah 27, which we just quoted from, which is a direct quote, a direct allusion from Jesus, the most direct allusion in Matthew 24:31. It speaks of the trumpet and gathering the elect that are dispersed. That's Matthew 24:31. But Isaiah 24 through 27 is one section. Isaiah's apocalypse, or the apocalypse of Isaiah. And yet in Isaiah 25 we see resurrection, death being swallowed up. In Isaiah chapter 26 we see resurrection. So at the time of the gathering back into the land for Israel in the nations that would believe, we have the time of the resurrection. And point number 3, the Matthean version of the Olivet, Matthew 24 through 25, is the New Testament source for eschatology. Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 draws heavily from the Olivet. 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, we have Paul making a progressive argument, drawing heavily from Matthew 24 through 25. This cannot be refuted. Yes, Paul's source, and a lot of people like to say, to take 1 Thessalonians 4 as an example. Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 4, I've heard from the word of the Lord. And the Dispies say, well, this is just a new mystery. This isn't from the actual words of the Lord in the gospel. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Isaiah chapter 24, or Matthew chapter 24, speaks of the trumpet, speaks of the gathering, and yet 1 Thessalonians 4 speaks of a trumpet, speaks of a gathering. 1 Thessalonians 5, the next chapter, speaks of Christ coming as a thief in the night. Yet in Matthew chapter 24, we see Jesus coming as a thief in the night. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Don Preston in this work has demonstrated quite clearly, I wish I could find the chart right now, quite clearly that Thessalonians is, or Matthew 24 through 25 is Paul's argument, or is his New Testament source in Thessalonians as a whole. And I would suggest that in Thessalonians, Paul's Old Testament source would be Isaiah 29 through 37. That apocalyptic language of flame and fire, so on and so forth, the judgment of the Assyrians. But I wish I could find that chart for you guys. I should have looked before I did the video. Let me see here if we can find it right quick. Well, here's one chart. Here's one chart. I don't know if you guys can see it. Matthew 24, 29 through 31 and 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 18. Coming of the Son of Man, coming of the Son of Man. With the angels, with the angels. With the trumpet, with the trumpet. Coming in clouds, descends from heaven in the air. Gathers the redeemed, gathers the redeemed. This generation will not pass until all these things, we who were alive until the coming of the Lord. But the chart I really want to find is the one where he shows 1 Thessalonians 1, 2, 3, all of it's taken from Matthew 24. And then later, of course, it's taken from Matthew chapter 25. Let me see here. No, I'm not going to find it right now. But yeah, John in Revelation, point number 4, John in Revelation, beginning in the judgments under the seals, draws heavily from the signs of Matthew 24. Our Charles H, what was his name? R.H. Charles, or Charles R.H., I forget his name. I have his 2-volume commentary, PDF on my computer. Back in the 60s, he was one of the first ones to recognize that the seal judgments, Revelation chapter 6, were taken from Matthew 24. Pestilence, famine, so on and so forth. And we can see, as Revelation is a recapitulation, these judgments of the seals, trumpets, woes, vials, they're repeated over and over and over again with different emphasis. Yet the premillennialists will say no, Revelation sequential. We read it out as Revelation chapter 6 through 19 is a 7-year tribulation. That won't work, of course. And as many have said, Revelation is John's Olivet Discourse. But yeah, that should suffice, I guess, guys. Also, 1 John chapter 2 through 4 I've recognized, I think it was last night I was studying 1 John, 1 John there, and I've noticed that 3 or 4, in chapter 4 he says, beware of prophets. In chapter 2 he gives 3 other signs of Matthew 24. So that's very interesting that even John seems to be drawn from the Olivet Discourse. But in a nutshell, the most important point would be point number 1 and point number 2, that this gathering of Matthew 24:31 is the gathering of the elect. It's the gathering of the elect from the 4 corners of heaven. And yet Jesus is taking this directly mainly from Isaiah chapter 27, which says they would be gathered back into Zion. And yet Isaiah chapter 27 is part and parcel of Isaiah chapter 24, 25, and 26. And yet Isaiah chapter 25 and 26 speaks of the resurrection. Isaiah chapter 43 and 49 speaks of Zion being restored, the mountain of the Lord being restored at this second Exodus, this gathering of the elect from the 4 corners of the earth in full restoration. So you cannot have the promises in piecemeal. You cannot say, yeah, well, maybe you're right there, Joel, but that doesn't mean resurrection or the Messianic temple would be fulfilled at that. No. If you're familiar with the prophets at all of it, boomo, on the day of the Lord, all of the promises, the covenantal promises from Abraham, the Davidic and the New, happen simultaneously at the same time. Just like Jesus in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, and Paul reiterating what Jesus said in 2 Timothy 4:1, that the coming of the Lord, the judgment, and the kingdom happen simultaneously. But that should probably do for now, guys. I probably went over a little bit, but hopefully this benefits someone. And I'm going to put the notes in the description box so you can kind of follow along the text that I was referring to. But I would challenge anyone. I would challenge any partial preterist, anyone to refute what I've just said here when it comes to Matthew chapter 24 verse 31. As it is irrefutable. It is irrefutable in my opinion, unless I can be shown wrong. Okay, guys, take her easy. God bless. Keep studying.